Hi, Keith here. Mark's behind the camera, and I'm going to teach you how to paint cumulus clouds. So I'm going to start with the colors I'm going to use. One of them will be, I forgot the name of it, cerulean blue. I'm sorry. All right.
These are what brand paints?
Hold on.
No, we can just keep going.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
All right.
Have some fun with it.
All right. So this is my new Schminky kit. Schminky is a German brand of watercolor. These are pan paints, which means that there's no liquid in the tray itself. It's all pure ground color, and therefore they last a lot longer, and they're much more concentrated in color. So you get to use a lot more water and get a lot more done. I love this set. This was gifted to me from my students in Celine, and thank you. It's a great little set. So I'm going to start with some cerulean blue. I'm going to put that in my tray. I want to get enough on there that I got something to work with. And then the other color I'm going to use is ultramarine blue. Now this is a very different, much colder color, whereas the cerulean was very warm, almost greenish. This is a much cooler color. And the purpose of this is that'll probably end up being my shadow colors for my clouds, shadows for my clouds. So I'm going to start. I don't know. Might be a little blue in the sky. It might be easy. No, I'm okay. All right. So I'm going to start by wetting everything that ain't a cloud. I'm going to do a little bit at a time so you can kind of watch me do this in chunks. That way maybe it's not going to be so intimidating. So I like my clouds fluffy and puffy with lots of little lumps and bumps in them. I don't like cumulus clouds that are just very smooth. To me, then they're not cumulus. So right now I'm just wetting the paper around my clouds. And I did draw in, I don't know if you can see it, but I did draw in very lightly my clouds because I don't like to guess. I like to, if I'm going to do a painting, I kind of want to know what I'm doing. So very lightly. Nothing ever quite survives the plan, but it's kind of fun to kind of lay it out a little bit. That way you have an opportunity. You can always change it as you go, but you're not guessing so much. Is about what I'm trying to say. All right.
So real quick, looks like you got your Low Cornell brush.
Yes.
We're using... Whose papers? Whose cold
Oh,
press?
this is Arches 140 cold press. My favorite. I like the 300 too, the 300 pound. But my favorite paper is Arches. The nice thing about Arches is if you make a mistake, you can actually fix it. You can actually scrub away the problem. There's a secret to it, which we could get into in a minute. I'll have to go get one, maybe in the break. But you can actually use a Mr. Clean scrubby pad, and you can actually erase a watercolor, which up until before Mr. Clean scrubby pads was very hard to do. All right, so I got the sky fairly wet. Now I'm going to start adding my color. Now, the thing about skies is they tend to be very dark, and as you come down the horizon, they get lighter. So let's start very dark at the top. And then as we move along, as we come down this picture, we will lighten it up as we go. But for right now...
Which blue did you just pick?
This is the cerulean. This is a very kind of warm, kind of sky blue. But a little... it's bright, it's happy. As opposed to the when I want a gray sky or a kind of a sad day or a more forlorn or cold, then I tend to use the other blue that's in my palette, which is the ultramarine blue. But for right now, I want happy blue, happy clouds in a happy sky. Okay, so as you can see, I've left areas of white, and these are going to be my clouds, obviously. You're going to notice something in a little bit too. I like to put bottoms on my clouds. What? So the cumuluses tend to be very, they grow tall. Whereas, you know, and then they tend to have a flat bottom. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So right now, this little first section, I can't see if you can tell, it isn't like perfectly flat, but you'll see as I come down that my clouds will start flattening out on the bottom. All right. I think, there you go. They don't have to be perfectly flat. All right. So at this point, I'm kind of taking my paint and I'm kind of blending it a little bit, just so I get maybe a little smoother touch there. All right. Now, the thing about watercolors is they tend to dry about 40% lighter than when they're wet. And this is what you got to kind of learn as a watercolorist, that you're going to kind of develop the eye, I think. It's like, is that dark enough? Or am I going to be going back and add more paint, more color? So right now I'm kind of happy with that. I don't know if you notice, as I come down, the color gets a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter, a little bit lighter. Okay? Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I am going to, now my clouds are dry because the water only goes where the paint only goes where the water is, okay? So as you can see, my clouds are white. I'm going to do something to kind of break these clouds up a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of water, just a little bit, and I'm going to kind of bleed some of this color from the sky by just adding a little bit of water to these clouds, and then kind of touching into the paint. And you will notice I'm going to create a little bit of texture in my clouds. All right. So now I don't want too much water and I don't want too much paint getting in, because then the clouds in the sky will be almost the same color. So as you can see, I'm hitting it with water, and some of the color is bleeding into the clouds themselves. So I'll just kind of hit here and there, just let it kind of work its way in. All right. And I'm not a big fan of real hard edges on my clouds, so as the sky is drying, I'm also kind of softening some of these edges with a little bit of water. So obviously they'll fill in a little bit. They won't be quite so hard edged. All right. So I'm going to come down a little bit further now and pick up the sky again using the cerulean blue. I'm going to wet the paper again. And I've got a little bit of color in there, so you might be able to see it. I'm just kind of wetting the areas. I'm just going to add a tiny bit of the blue. And I'm just going to kind of fill in these areas where there is sky, okay? So bear with me a little bit here. Now, as you can see, I'm using a lot less paint because as I'm coming down on the horizon, I am slowly making the color fade as it comes down. So, yeah, oh, I like that. Well, I'm glad somebody does. All right. So at this point, if you like something and you want to kind of let it set and dry, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a little break and we're going to let this dry, and then we can kind of come in and I can start adding my some more of the value to the clouds to give them a little more character, a little more three-dimensionality. Okay, so let's pause it right there, and we'll let this dry up. I'm back, and I'm about to start adding some shadows to the clouds to give them a little depth, a little character. Okay, so here's where I'm going to grab a little bit more of my cerulean blue, just so it's in the tray. And then I'm going to mix a little bit of that with the ultramarine blue. And I'm going to get a kind of a pretty blue. Yeah, I don't know is that a technical term or... But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create shadows along the bottom of these clouds. So I'm going to take a little bit of this color. I'm running it along the bottoms of the clouds that are already showing. So I'm just going to take a little bit of water after I painted that dry onto the paper. But then I'm going to take a little bit of water and just kind of blend that shadow a little bit.
Now, the two blues were different to begin with. Why didn't you just use the other blue straight? Why'd you mix it?
I wanted a little bit of the other color, the cerulean blue, in the clouds so that it wasn't such a drastic change in color between the shadows in the clouds. So that's why I added a little bit of the cerulean. Now, this is a great way to break up clouds, too. So if you're watching, and you are, hope you're watching, if you'll note, I kind of went around and created like a little high spot so that I'm getting two different clouds, one in front of another one. So as you can see, so I got the shadow going here along the bottom of this one. And then I have this new cloud that I just broke away from this cloud. I'm going to put a base on this one too. Like I said, basically, I want them kind of flat. I don't want them too jumping around too much. So all right. Now the fun part is we will be adding other color to this, but for right now, what I am doing is basically just kind of laying out my shadows on these cumulus clouds. So if you notice, they're all kind of flat along the bottom of the clouds. I think I might bump a little bit. All right, so I think that's working for me. All right, so at this point, what I'm going to do is I am going to add a little bit of crimson. All right, it's a new kit. That's not crimson. Add a little bit of crimson to my palette. And I'm going to mix that As you can see, I get a very vibrant purple, okay? And I'm going to add just a little bit of that.
That was the crimson mixed with which?
Oh, I'm sorry, is mixed with the ultramarine blue. And this is going to be kind of my final dark color on these clouds. Although I might, put a little brighter purple here and there inside the clouds too. But for the most part, I'm just adding a little of this. Creates a lot of drama and very vibrant and very pretty rather than just plain old gray clouds. Because if you got a nice day, there's a lot of nice colors in clouds. The fun part too is, it doesn't all have to be blues and violets. A lot of times clouds will reflect sunsets. They'll reflect sunrises. You'll get some yellows. You'll get pinks. There's a lot of other colors that you can incorporate into your clouds.
Let us know in the comments if you want to see Keith paint a sunset or sunrise.
Oh, that's $5, so just send your $5 to me, Keith McGuire. All right. Yeah, that's fun. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to start breaking up. All right, I was just kidding about the $5. Gosh. I'm just going to add a little more texture to the clouds just so they're kind of fun. As you can see, I'm using that little bit of purple, but I'm making it very light now. All right. So this little bottom layer down here, these are clouds that are kind of far off. They're small and very flat, and they're pretty far away. But by adding that little bit of shadow, see how they pop to life like that. All right. So now, great, I got a nice little happy sky. And now I'm going to, what am I going to do? I think what I'm going to do is add a little bit of ground to this thing just to kind of anchor it. So it isn't just the happy sky painting. So I'm going to have probably a tree line. I'll have a couple maybe open fields kind of look to it. I'm going to wait and let this dry completely. It'll only be a couple minutes. And we'll go ahead and maybe kind of finish up by putting a foreground in it. And then we'll see after that, do we need to bump up the clouds with a little more color? It depends on when you add color, more color to a painting, it changes the dynamic of the painting. So let's go ahead and take a break, and we'll start the third step right after this dries. Okay, I'm back. And you may notice that my water went from blue to white, or clear again. Yay!
Don't use white water.
Yeah, white water. Coconut. Anyway, it is a good idea to change your water off, and it does tint the other colors if you're working with them. So I decided I was going to kind of put a couple fields, small fields, in the bottom of this picture with a tree line. So I am going to mix up. And I'm going to mix up a little yellow ochre, which is kind of like a golden yellow, little dull on the duller side. And the reason I'm using yellow ochre instead of doing green fields, is yellow is the opposite of violet, which we used a little bit of violet in the clouds. And I think this will help it make kind of pop. So I'm going to throw a little bit of this yellow ochre into the foreground here. Now I didn't wet it, but I got quite a bit of water in the paint itself. So as you can see, I've kind of broken the plane into to a nice rolling hill. And then I'm going to basically, I'm going to add a little more color because I'm going to make it a little darker at the base here, kind of give it a little bit of a shadow. There. All right. And then I'm going to use, now this is called May Green. I don't think it's like a stock color. Kind of reminds me of permanent green light. That's a color I do recommend. The reason I like it is it's a very bright green, but when you mix it with other greens, you get such a wide range of colors. I love this color. It really kind of helps other greens be perkier. For 5-10 years, I went crazy trying to find happy greens that didn't glow in the dark, but most of the greens just dried down to a very dull color. This permanent green light, this May Green for Schminkies, that's their name for it. Really does help kind of perk up greens. So I'm going to do kind of like a tree line. So what I'm doing is basically, I don't want any detail. I want it to look like there's trees back there, but I don't want to see individual trees. Not yet, anyway. So I'm just kind of putting some color in.
And if you miss any of the paint colors that Keith's using, or the brand of paint, or the paint brushes, we always put links in the descriptions so you can follow along, purchase the exact stuff that Keith's using, or at least know which ones he used in this project.
Yeah. No, it's I love this paint. The Schminkies is a wonderful brand. I love these brushes, as a matter of fact. These are the Lowell Cornell 70-20 Ultra Rounds. The reason I like them is I can get a very fine tip on these things, and they hold their very fine tip for a very long time if you take care of them. And they're not particularly expensive. They're a nice brush. They're just a nice brush. They're Teflon. They're not like squirrel or some fancy flavored brush. But they're a good medium range brush for beginners, for experts. It really helps. Now, I don't know if you notice what I'm doing now. I'm basically dropping a little bit of water into the stuff I've already painted in the trees there, and I'm creating little blooms. And I'm just kind of breaking up that green a little bit so it isn't all one tone. All right, so I'm going to let that go. I see I made a little drip here. I'm just going to grab that and blend it out. Very good. Now, one more set of trees. I'm going to grab a different green, or I'm going to create, hopefully, a different green, because I don't want everything to look the same. So this particular set of trees are more in the foreground, so I'm going to make them a little bit darker.
Which colors are you mixing to make this new green?
Some pretty color greens. Hang on one second.
Hold on.
All right, I'm back. And I'm back. All right. The colors I'm using now to make this little bolder green a little darker are permanent green olive and cobalt green dark. Now, they came with this set. And they're a nice color. What I'm also going to do, though, is I'm going to add a tiny bit of the cerulean blue. And it's going to give it a bit of a blue cast to this green now. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wet this section a little bit. Oop, I still had a little paint in there, but we're okay. So I'm going to wet this section a little bit so that it goes on loosely. How's that sound? All right, yeah. So now when I put it down, as you can see, it starts, I'm breaking it up, but I'm also, I don't know if you can see, I'm creating like little tree limbs and branches that are coming out. Then I'm going to have this little ridge of trees here kind of go down the hill just a hair.
So are we like flying in the sky? Is that the perspective angle we're?
No. We're kind of like on the next roll of the hill. We're just a little farther back. So no, nothing like that. We're not way up in the sky. Actually, by putting this ground in, we've kind of anchored ourselves. We aren't flying around. We are no longer flying around in the sky, but rather are now on the ground. I'm adding a little bit of the blue again, just to give myself a little bit of value. And the blue I'm using is the cerulean, and I'm just creating a little bit of shadow along the ground on this one particular clumping of trees. Clumping? He makes up his own words as he goes, too. All right. And he refers to himself in the third person. All right. So, if you're wondering what I do when I come to, I'm basically drying my brush off on my leg. Paper towel works very well. Unfortunately, I got into a bad habit of doing that years ago. So just, my students laugh. They also get out of my way because I tend to shoot water all over the place when I'm trying to get the water out of my brush. So people don't usually, stand right around here when they're watching me paint. Okay, so I'm going to add a little more of the May green and a little more of the two darker greens, the permanent green olive and the cobalt green. And I'm just going to start adding. It's still very wet, so what I'm trying to do is let it kind of bleed out on its own. So the trick with watercolors is you really want the watercolors to do some of the work for you. And by doing how you do that is you wet the paper and you put the paint down while it's still wet. I don't know if anybody can see what I'm doing. Can you? Is that working?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, you can see it? Okay.
I'll yell at you if we can.
All right, fine. All right, now. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so what I'm doing is basically I'm lifting the paper up and I'm letting it kind of bleed towards the top. As you can see, it doesn't go all the way because there wasn't enough paint and enough water to do that. So what's nice is now I've got 2 or 3 things going on. These could be different branches. These could be different plants. These could be 2 or 3 different plants. As you can see, the green in the background is a little grayer, a little less. It's pushed back a little bit, okay? So at this point, we can let this dry up, add more detail after it dries, okay? You gotta let the paint set. You can't just keep adding color, because it'll just keep bleeding and mixing, and you end up with a blob. So the idea is when you get to the color that you like, stop, let it dry. I'm going to let that dry. While that's going on, though, I'm going to take a little more of the yellow ochre and a little burnt sienna, which is a kind of reddish brown color. I'm going to add that to the yellow ochre. All right, and I'm going to gently, now I'm not going to touch the green, I'm just going to come up close, or we'll have green through there. I'm just going to wet this first hill, okay?
Keith hates green grass.
Yeah, I want everything brown. All right, what I'm going to do is kind of give this, I bled a little of the green in. Hey, that's watercolors though, okay? What I'm doing is kind of giving these rows, or giving these hills kind of rows of, we're not sure what vegetable that is, or could be soybeans, could be whatever. But as you can see, I've created little rows of color of using the burnt sienna and the yellow ochre to get a little warmer color, a little darker color than the original just yellow ochre I put on at first. So I'm going to let that. It's looking good. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to come to the back hill now. I'm going to do the same thing, only now the land is a little farther away. So I've got to be careful. Well, if I do hit a little bit of green, oh well. Again, watercolors. That's kind of the fun of watercolors, letting things kind of accidentally bleed into each other. All right, so now this time I want the lines to be smaller because they're farther away. But I got to see how, okay, yeah, there we go. If it's too wet, they'll just all bleed away. And I do want it to bleed a little bit. I want it to be soft. Okay, very good. But if you bleed too much away, then you're just going to have to do it again. Do it again. All right, so, yeah, very good. All right, at this point, I can't do a lot more with that, okay? It's just everything's wet now, so I'm going to wait. This is a good place to let it dry up, add a little more detail to this, and it will be about done. So, take a break. All right, we're going to wrap this up now. All I'm going to do is add a little bit of detail just to kind of finish off the painting. I'm going to add a little bit of, what is this? Sepia. So it's kind of a brownish gray. And all I'm going to do is take and create maybe just a few little branches coming out of my my little wood pile here, or my little trees here. So I'm just adding a few tiny little, because let's face it, nothing is all alive. There's usually a lot of dead stuff. So a few dead branches coming up just kind of makes it look a little more real. I'm going to add now, I'm also using a little smaller brush. Same company, same thing, just smaller. I'm going to add a little bit of darker green along the base here. And then also I'm going to add a little bit of the yellow ochre too. So it'll kind of look like maybe there's something else kind of growing in amongst these trees. So
when do we paint in the irrigation system for the
just
field?
let it go. I know these desperate farmers in California. Now this looks good. I'm just gonna, actually I think the desperate farmers are good now in California from what I heard after this winter's snowfall and rainfall. The only other thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to take and just kind of reintroduce the lines for the crops. So I'm using kind of a thin line right now, and I'll show you why. As we get a little closer, get a little fatter. Okay. All I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a little bit of water in my brush. I'm just going to smear these just a little. That's a technical term. Smearing. Just so it has a little bit of, it isn't just a hard line. And then in the back here, I'm going to do it again, only the lines will be thinner, maybe a little closer together, a little farther away. This kind of represents being a little bit farther away. I'm just going to take a little bit of water to that too. Just kind of soften it up. All right. I think you can play with this, but we're pretty much done. Or I'm pretty much done. But you can add little trees here and there, maybe a couple branches or small trees kind of in the foreground a little, or in front of these trees, in front of this horizon here. But I think that looks good. So I'm gonna wrap it up here. Let's this was my sky demo, but you get a little bit of a open field demo too. So anything else?
Just reminder, all the materials that Keith used today in this video, there will be a link in the description. It takes you back to Keith's website where we can actually list them in full. It got a little crazy for YouTube. Check out his website, check out his class schedules, watch some of the old videos, leave us a comment with any ideas or things you'd like to see us do. And with that, like this video, comment, subscribe, and thanks for watching.
Yeah, subscribe, please. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.